Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Barry Bishop, president of Virginians for High-Speed Rail. We have nearly 500 people registered for today's town hall for our first ever Virginia State of Rail Town Hall. The purpose of our virtual town hall series is to give Virginians an opportunity to hear from and engage with the leading transportation decision makers and thinkers in the Commonwealth and nation today. Our town hall series is made possible at no cost to participants through the generous support of our program sponsor, WSP, and our supporting sponsors, Washington, D.C. South Carmel Church Station and Plugger and Associates. We thank them for their support. One bit of housekeeping, if you will. Please send your questions via the chat box to our Executive Director, Danny Plugger, who will address them to our panelists today. Today's town hall will also be posted on YouTube sometime next week, and we encourage you to share the link with your colleagues. For those of you not familiar with Virginians for High-Speed Rail, we were founded in the 1990s by business leaders in Richmond and Hampton Roads to advocate for expansion of passenger rail in the Commonwealth and to build grassroots support for the Southeast High-Speed Rail Corridor connecting Washington, D.C. to Virginia, North Carolina, and points south. You know, one only needed to travel by car or plane this past week, or frankly, just turn on the news to see the importance of the work that today's panelists are moving forward. Better rail service is not just about nostalgia for the past. It's about offering Virginians true mobility so they don't have to get to the airport 3 hours early or sit in a sea of red brake lights while their GPS keeps telling them to take the next exit while they crawl along at 2 miles per hour. It's about offering a viable third option, high quality, world-class passenger rail. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists for this afternoon's town hall. Jennifer DeBruhl was appointed the director of the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation in June of 2022 by Governor Youngkin. Jennifer joined DRPT as the chief of public transportation in 2016, following over 20 years of distinguished public service at VDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. DJ Stadtler was appointed executive director of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority in April of 2021. DJ came to VPRA from Amtrak, where he spent 12 years serving in 3 different executive vice president roles: chief financial officer, chief operating officer, and chief administrative officer. His 25 years of experience in the railroad industry also includes time at the Federal Railroad Administration, where he served as deputy chief financial officer, overseeing budget, accounting, procurement, and real estate. Rich Dalton was appointed CEO of the Virginia Railway Express in 2020. A seasoned rail operations veteran, Rich previously served as VRE's deputy CEO and chief operating officer. Before joining VRE in 2009, he spent 19 years in private industry with a global leader in passenger and freight rail. Moderating this afternoon's town hall is Danny Plugger, Executive Director of Virginians for High-Speed Rail. Danny?
Thank you, Barry. This afternoon, I'm going to briefly set the table for today's program. Oops. There we go. And give a little bit of background of what led to transforming rail in the Commonwealth. So briefly, in 1992, VRE and DRPT were created and respectively launched. Over the next preceding decade, from 1993 to 2003, VRE's ridership grew to nearly 3 million annual passengers. In 2008, Virginia became the 18th state across the nation to launch or to exceed 1 million annual trips. And in 2009, we became the 18th state to join and launch our own passenger rail service, including the Lynchburg Amtrak regional train extension from DC to Lynchburg, as well as the third Amtrak regional to Richmond. In 2010, VRE exceeded 4 million annual passengers. And over the preceding next few years, in 2012, our Norfolk extension of the Richmond train started. Amtrak exceeded 1.5 million trips here in Virginia in 2013. In 2017, the Roanoke extension from the Lynchburg train began. In 2019, Virginia extended a second frequency from Richmond all the way down the Hampton Roads in Norfolk. And so at the same time, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, VMTs, vehicle miles traveled on our interstate lane miles, grew 55%. And so while our multimodalism continued to do well, our commuter and intercity passenger rail, our roadways continue to get clogged. And that led the Secretary of Transportation at the time, Shannon Valentine, to do an I-95 corridor capacity study to figure out how do we start moving more people. And what that study found was widening I-95 by one lane in each direction for 50 miles would cost somewhere in the range of $12.5 billion. And that by the time that construction was completed in 10 years, the corridor would be just as congested as it is today. And that is what led Virginia to rail and launching the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative, which is a very multi-year, multi-decade, multi-phase, ambitious program of over $3.7 billion that brought 412 miles of railroad into public ownership, 250 miles of railroad trackage, and during afterward of phases 1 and 2 will result in a 53% increase in Amtrak service and a 39% increase in VRE service. And so with that, my first question to today's panelist is, in a quick one sentence, what's an update on transforming rail and all the great things happening in Virginia? And so on left on my screen is Jen DeBruhl, so I'll kick it over to her first. Jen?
Well, I'm as excited today as I was back when Secretary Valentine made that statement a few years ago. And I think what we see is data is showing that those studies are proving to be true. And we're seeing our ridership grow. Every month we're setting a new record, and we've seen, all over 1.8 million passengers in the federal fiscal year. We're continuing to develop the program, which I'm sure I'll talk about later on, and look towards the future and new corridors and how we can continue to expand passenger rail as an alternative to, traveling on Virginia's congested highways. So really happy to be here today.
Thank you, Jen. DJ?
Thanks, Danny. And I'll continue that theme, and I might use two sentences, but also really the word that sums it up is excited. I mean, we continue to see the ridership grow. We're here to add capacity and to add the ability to separate freight and passenger, because those two don't work well together on the same right of way. And excited to say that we continue to stay on schedule with our major procurements and focused on adding service in 2026 and even more service in 2030. So I would just do one word: we're excited with what we're doing in Virginia.
And Rich?
Thanks, Danny. I'll continue to the excitement trend. Yes, we at VRE, we continue to see ridership increase. For example, from a cumulative year to date, comparing 23 to 22, our ridership is through the month of November or through the month of October, we're up about 30%. So that's exciting to us. And of course, we continue to look for some service enhancements up to and including what Transforming Rail in Virginia has laid out for us in the near future. So yeah, definitely excited. Wake up every day excited to come to VRE and continue to see how all of this, all these collaborative efforts, if you will, continue to come to fruition and definitely excited about not just the future, but the near term as well. Glad to be here.
Thank you. DJ, we've been hearing about the Transforming Rail in Virginia project for a few years now. When will the new passenger rail corridor, including the Long Bridge, be ready for passenger rail service?
Sure. So you're exactly right. We've been hearing about it since before VPRA even existed. And we have, thankfully, the former Secretary Valentine and her team back then were not short of brilliant. And I don't use that word lightly, because they structured a multiple phase portfolio of projects so we can add service. What they didn't want to do is say, here's Transforming Rail in Virginia. It's all going to be done in 2030 when Long Bridge is done. And that's when you will see new service. They structured the agreement with the freight railroad, so as soon as it was signed, we could add some service. We added some service again last year, putting the third round trip to Norfolk and the second round trip to Roanoke. And in 2026, The Franconia Springfield bypass will be completed. The Alexandria 4th track will be completed, and that will trigger even more service. You asked specifically when the corridor will be done, when Longbridge will be done. I will say that Longbridge will be done in 2030, but I'm not sure that's when the corridor is done, because as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to, using Rich's word, and it's a great one, collaborate with our friends at VRE, with our friends at CSX, with our friends at Norfolk Southern, most importantly with our friends at DRPT, to continue to look at where the choke points are and where we can add strategically capacity that allow passenger and freight to work well together. So the next thing you'll see, and we've got a lot of small projects that are already underway and already making improvements, but the next big change will be in 2026 when the bypass is done. We've talked before about the bypass that keeps passenger trains separate from the freight. And when Alexandria 4th track will be done, giving us dedicated tracks going in both directions. 2026 will be the next big tranche of new service, and then 2030 Longbridge will be done, unlocking even more service.
Thank you. And next question is for Jen. VPRA and in the efforts to grow passenger rail get a lot of the media attention. What is DRP doing to improve rail service, not only passenger, but freight as well in the Commonwealth?
I would say DRPT and VPRA, while we are two separate entities now, still collaborate and work very closely together to establish and to deliver on the vision of transforming rail in Virginia. VPRA takes the lead on implementation, and DRPT, we're working on the pipeline of projects. So 2022 statewide rail plan lays out the vision for where we go with both passenger and freight rail into the future. So as you know, VPRA delivers on the first two phases of transforming rail in Virginia, rail to the New River Valley. That next tier of priorities is going to come out of the statewide rail plan and the work that's being done at DRPT. DJ and I and our respective teams work really closely together to make sure that we're, keeping focused, that they're focused on delivery, and that we're focused on kind of feeding those next projects to them. I always like to say that the work that they're doing on Longbridge and 4th track and the bypass to separate passenger and freight rail are just as beneficial for the freight side as they are for passenger rail. And so as we look at freight and moving more freight and supporting continued growth at the port and taking trucks off of our roadways, we're managing our grant programs to help do that. We're pursuing federal funding to help us deal with some rail crossing issues related to not only passenger rail traffic, but freight rail traffic. So we stay really busy here. And then I guess one of the last things that I want to mention about how we work together is that by code, I get the privilege of serving as the chair of the VPRA board. And that is, I get two jobs for the price of one, I guess, in some ways. But it's really been quite a pleasure to see VPRA go from an idea to delivering mega projects, and couldn't be prouder of the team at VPRA and the good work that they're doing, and how we have figured out how to spin off an entirely new agency and work together and collaborate as much as we do.
Thank you, Jen. Rich, VRE ridership has been improving over the last couple of years, and I know VRE was, I think, the fastest growing commuter rail service for the first quarter of 2023 in the nation. Can you give us an update on kind of where the ridership stands and what steps are being taken to grow ridership?
Yes, as mentioned in the opening, we've seen on a year-over-year basis our ridership continue to increase. Like I said, from a cumulative basis, we're up. We should end the year, calendar year I'm talking here, is we should end the year pretty close to about 1.4 million riders for the calendar year, which compared to 2023, it was just slightly over 1 million again in the calendar year. We of course continue to look at service enhancements, given the as mentioned before, there is, once the investments made into the planned infrastructure improvements, as DJ mentioned before, there's a couple of timelines out there. 2026 would be one that that both Amtrak and VRE could expand some service. We do have a couple of train slots available to us now, similar to the Amtrak state supported service upon execution of the TRV agreement. We do have that slated in our annual budget to get that approved so we could start that in our fiscal year 2025. And then we're just, there's, in terms of service enhancements, it's not just the rider experience in the seat. We're looking at other things along the way, such as part of our budget process this year. We're looking at like simplification of our fare media, looking at just some enhancements inside the current parameters that we operate relative to train slots and stuff like that, just to make those a little bit more efficient, and frankly, continue to work on ways, as DJ mentioned before, the ultimate objective here is to have that freight and passenger separation. But in the meantime, we have to live with that, right? So just making some enhancements potentially that just minimize delay to both passenger and freight trains, right? And to continue to work on those ways to particularly on the passenger side, once you mitigate those interferences, if you will, it just yields more reliable trains that are on time, etc. So there's a whole host of things that we're working on, and that's sort of an overview of those items, Danny.
Thanks, Rich. DJ, what is the estimated cost for all the Transforming Rail in Virginia projects? And does the Commonwealth have all the funding we need? And if not, how can the folks viewing today's program help us get there?
The current estimate is about $4.7 billion for Transforming Rail in Virginia, and of that, about $2.3 billion is the Long Bridge, which is the biggest of all of the projects. We do not have it entirely fully funded. We're thrilled that we just got a $100 million grant from the government for the Franconia-Springfield bypass. We've had multiple localities give us money. We've got a $20 million raise grant that will help us for the pedestrian bike bridge that is on the south package of Long Bridge that will connect the Aquatic Center in Arlington to DC, just on the other side of the Potomac River. That we've got $20 million for that, plus some funding from DC. So we're well funded. We currently have an application in on the Fed State Partnership Grant with DOT for 729, which would be the gap for all phase 1 and phase 2 projects, 729 million. We hope to hear something soon on that in the next month or so. But in the meantime, we've been really public with our financial plan. It's posted on our website. It shows exactly where the money comes from, where it's going. We're fortunate in that we are currently in the procurement process for both the bypass and the Long Bridge North package, and both of those are fully funded. So we're moving forward with those procurements with the understanding that when we get a vendor on board, they won't have any risk for funding. That funding is there. Hopefully over the course of the next few months, whether it's from Fed State Partnership or other sources, we will be able to close that gap on phases 1 and 2.
Thank you, DJ. And there's an interesting question that came through the chat, and it's, do you think even a fraction of what Virginia has collectively accomplished could have been done without the creation of DRPT and VPRA?
I mean, Walt Disney said it's fun to do the impossible, but Shannon Valentine said it's much easier to do the impossible when you've got two groups working well together for the same goal.
Yeah, I would just say 30 years ago, when the General Assembly had the vision and foresight to break DRPT out from VDOT, I think that put us on a trajectory that is unlike what I see in any other state in the country. And that set us up for success. And that was all about how important it is to make sure we're taking care of transit and rail. And so we celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. And that is not lost on me, that without DRPT being here 30 years ago, we would not have gotten to the point where there was even a need for a VPRA. And so that focus and what we're doing here, you don't see anywhere else in the country.
Danny, can I just add to that? I think that's spot on. The other benefit we have in this region is the just horrific traffic that we all deal with every single day. And look, I'm still bitter because this weekend I went from my house in Fredericksburg up to Vienna, Virginia to visit with family. And there's not train service that can get me there. I could take the train and take the metro, but there wasn't a train coming back late enough to get me home. And the last thing I wanted to do is spend the night at my cousin's house. Sorry. But we went about 50 miles in 2 hours, and that's just not sustainable. So whatever your politics are, you know how frustrating that type of highway traffic is, and you just long for a better experience that's trip time competitive on the train, on the metro, multimodal, that gets you where you want to go when you want to be there. And that's a benefit that we see here that I think a lot of folks don't have in their communities.
Absolutely. Everybody in Virginia has an I-95, I-81, or I-64 horror story most of the time. Very rarely is it ever we got on the interstate and we beat the GPS. If you did, please let me know. I think it's imagination. Rich and DJ, what are some of the smaller improvements, you kind of touched on them, that we can expect to see over the next couple years, maybe through 2026?
So I'll go first. Rich was kind of pausing. We're kind of waiting to see who goes first. So I'll go first. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is our partnership with Amtrak, who operates our trains. And we can put all the capacity in that we want, but if the service that they provide isn't reliable, isn't safe, isn't pleasant for the customer, that's going to drive folks away from the train instead of to the train. So a lot of the work that we're doing with Amtrak on service standards, making sure that trains run efficiently, that the dwell time, so when folks get off the train, folks get on the train, is efficient, that folks at the station in Ashland, where we're going to get PID soon, know when the train's coming, which track it's on. All of that work is so important to getting folks to take the train and take it again. So you'll see continued improvements in that area, whether it's passenger information systems, whether it's better communication between Amtrak and VRE and the freights. We've got monthly performance groups, actually weekly performance groups, that work and look at every delayed train and say, okay, why did this happen? Whether it's a freight train, a VRE train, or an Amtrak train, why did it happen? And what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again? That open communication is really priceless in getting the whole network to work well together as we're waiting for these capital improvements to be put in place. In addition to that, from an infrastructure point of view, we're doing a lot of early works on some of the bigger capital projects. You'll see better communication through these projects so we can get the capacity moving more fluidly. But until fourth track opens, until the bypass opens, you won't really see the true benefit of passenger freight separation.
And then let me just add there, just specifically in the Northern Virginia corridor, in 2024, about mid-2024, of course, for those that, and I know there's some that are viewing today that are familiar with the Quantico Station Improvement Project, that also connects the 9-mile third track segment there in the Arkandale to North Possum Point area. That'll be completed. That'll be huge. That's a joint shared facility, the Quantico station, with both Amtrak and VRE. It in addition to the third track being added, there's basically 3 platform edges, which gives us a lot more network flexibility, nimbleness, if you will, within the corridor. A couple of things, and I'm trying not to double up on what DJ talked about, but a couple of things. We will start constructing the Potomac Shore Station in 2024. The garage is already being constructed as we speak. And then just don't want to lose sight of the fact that as we talk about expansion, as we talk about expanding the network and stuff like that, we got to take care of what we already have, right? So an example of that is at the Fredericksburg station. There's a rehabilitation project happening at the Fredericksburg station that you all should see. A completed project there in again mid-2024. The thing there is that we're rehabilitating both east and west platforms there. That gives us about 125 feet of additional platform space, and of course that helps both VRE and Amtrak similarly in that that we can both of us can get more doors open at that station, and of course reduce our dwell time. And there's some we're addressing some accessibility enhancements there as well. So just a run through of some of the physical, tangible things that you should see out there. Primarily in 2024, we do also have some projects going on. We're constructing a Manassas Park parking garage on our Manassas line that should be opening up at the end of 2025. That's a great addition to a city center redevelopment district that the city of Manassas Park has been leading. So a lot of, again, just there's a whole host of efforts, if you will, with sort of TRV being somewhat the umbrella, but just wanted to point out that there's a lot of I'll just say less highlighted type projects that have a positive contribution once they come online, and we expect to have return on that investment in both from a ridership perspective and of course from a safety and a reliability perspective as well. So I'll stop there.
And
Unless you
Danny,
thought of something else.
I was going to say, Danny, if I could jump in, DJ hit on my favorite station because I'm a frequent user of Ashland, and he knows that. You look at the improvements that have already been made at Ashland, and the high-level platforms has really improved the passenger experience. But I don't want to move off of this without mentioning Staples Mill Station. We took ownership of these stations as part of TRV, and we're improving the customer experience that the folks have at stations like Staples Mill that served over 300,000 boardings in 2022. And so that having a better passenger experience just makes the services that much better. We're looking forward to doing the same thing with Ettrick. And so, those are things that, like, everybody wants to talk about Long Bridge, but having someplace that's easily accessible and is pleasant to wait for the train just makes the whole experience that much better for Virginia.
And absolutely, it's the little things that people remember. Walking into a 1970s Amtrak station that looks like it's still stuck in the 1970s leaves an impression. And Rich, I will say that the work at Fredericksburg seems to be rocking and rolling. My wife, son, and I took the train up to have lunch with a cousin. Much like DJ, we did not want to stay the night over there, so we made sure to take the train back too. But it was you could see all the work that was happening, and it looked good compared to kind of how it has been in the past. And it's great to see that happening at all of our passenger rail stations. And this kind of leads me into one of the next questions. And I'm going to paraphrase because the questioner had a very specific route. But this is for all three of you. Do y'all ever take fact-finding trips along your routes to observe, evaluate, experience, and just kind of see any of the solutions or problems and chat with passengers? And I know the answer because I think I've ridden a train with all three of y'all before at different times over the years. And so do y'all practice what you preach? And what experiences have you had? And I'll start with Jen since she's top left for me on my screen.
So I like DJ, don't get to ride as much as I would like because the schedule doesn't always suit, and I end up spending more time on 95 than I like to admit, but I love to ride. And I had a particularly profound experience. I think, Danny, I think I rode up with you and then came back the next day on a train. It was a Friday morning train out of DC headed back to Ashland. And the train pulling out of Union Station was completely sold out. And I was sitting in a I don't know what I want to call it, a pod, but 4 seats where you've got people facing each other. I was in there with 3 strangers, and I have to admit, I was a little grumpy because I might have been a little tired, and I was like, gosh, these people are like all in my space. And then I had to remind myself, this is why I do what I do, and the fact that that train is full is exactly why we do the work we do every day. And so I ended up sitting there talking to the folks that I was seated with on the train for probably half the trip back. And it was really interesting. And I think I was probably back to Fredericksburg before they said, what do you do? And I had to confess at that point what I do for a living. I've also been there to do a little bit of that on the platform at Ashland. It's usually when a train is late. DJ probably doesn't like when I ride because I end up texting with questions and stuff and end up being like the unofficial ambassador for Amtrak. But yeah, I practice what I preach and I love it. It reminds me why I do what I do every day.
I'm not going to say whether I like or don't like when Jen rides, but I will say I know when she's riding for sure. So let me just follow up on that. So yeah, Danny, I'm the same way. I ride as often as I can. I enjoy seeing what we're offering to the customers. I have said, and I said this during my time at Amtrak, I learn more on a train ride than I do in any meeting in the office. And it's important to talk to folks and hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I don't have as much time as I'd like to do that. So what we have at VPRA, and we've got about 45 employees, we've got a rider program that if you want to take the train, if you're a VPRA employee and you want to take the train, you can take a personal train ride and we'll pay for it as long as you give us a survey and you talk to folks in all different categories and let us know how that experience was so we can get that feedback back to Amtrak and work on making it better. Now it's not unlimited. You can only have a few rides, but we want to get as many folks out there to see the product. It's kind of like the old story, hey, I've worked for the Coca-Cola company for years, but I've never had a Coca-Cola. I mean, we think that if we're in charge of increasing service, enhancing service, and getting more folks to take the service, we need to know what it's like, the good, the bad, and the challenging. So yeah, we preach that as an organization, spend as much time on the rails as you can, for sure.
And then I'll jump in here. Yes, I am a regular rider on VRE, and not just from the perspective to collaborate or listen to the passengers and stuff like that. And I think your words, Danny, were to check up on things. And it's not just specific trains. I try to get across our entire system. But also take head-end rides so I can see from the viewpoint of the operators and stuff what they're seeing out there, which is important to some of the work that's going on with transforming rail in Virginia as we look at ways to enhance operability, to reduce to mitigate congestion, all those other things that we're collectively working on. If not only for the future but in the interim, it's important to hear firsthand from the employees out there that actually are on our service on a daily basis. And yes, I still at least once a month jump on a regional Amtrak train to just if for no other reason just to benchmark us a little bit, and frankly in some cases it's somewhat complementary to the VRE service because of the different time slots that they operate as well. So yes, I'm very active in the operation of VRE.
Excellent, and thank you all. I have a lot of friends who are federal workers who live in Richmond who have started taking VRE on their days back, and they apparently there's nothing better than the sunrise over Quantico on the morning trains up and kind of enjoying the sunset on the way back down, although not as beautiful. And so if you have never done that, please partake, although I imagine our audience has. Rich, VRE is a little bit more than halfway through the process of updating its forward-looking systems plan. Kind of where are you in that process? And at a higher level, how do you envision your service down the road, especially with the changing dynamic of the federal workforce?
Sure, thanks. Yes, yes, definitely more than halfway. We're just we originally established the update to our long-range vision to be in a three-phase or to be a three-phase process. We're just wrapping up the second phase, entering into the third phase. We plan to present. Well, we've continued to work with our operations board at the transition from each phase, but we plan to present the holistic look, if you will, by at least mid 2024. Actually, start looking at that a little bit sooner in the calendar year. But obviously, since the last time we've done an extensive update to that long range plan in 2014, a lot of things have changed. And of course, one of the things, well, maybe two prominent things have changed. One, of course, being transforming rail in Virginia, but nonetheless, but also the change in regional travel patterns, subsequent to the pandemic and stuff. So this has given us an opportunity. A lot of the work that we had done, at least from a I'll just say a tentative service plan, looking into later on in the decade, post 2030. Post Longbridge, heavily influenced based off of, pre-pandemic ridership travel patterns. So this has given us an opportunity to refocus that effort to see what that looks like, and all the more reason. And I'll go back to DJ's opening remark again. It's so critical for us to even get close to meeting the demand that's currently out there, to obtain that freight and passenger rail separation. That would then open up for VRE, of course, the ability to run a more robust, service off of the peak, the traditional peak windows, reverse flow service, all those different things, and really, continue to complement with the Amtrak service in this region. It's a total game changer for us. But we have to get there, and we get that. And I think we are some pretty impatient people when it comes to it not getting here sooner rather than later. But we understand, you got to make the investments, you got to do the planning, got to do the design, and then the construction and stuff. But it couldn't happen, too soon for us to get to that point. And that's what we're learning out of it is frankly, we had a sense that it was there before, particularly, some level of bidirectional service, some more levels of frequency, but it's very, very evident now that that's just simply the, where the ridership patterns or the travel patterns have moved to, and we need to be able to adapt to that. So that's what we've learned.
And are you seeing kind of a new normal starting to settle in a little bit? I know everything, the last few years have been very kind of fluid.
Yeah.
It seems like things are settling, at least from our viewpoint. But I don't know if y'all see that as well.
There's a few slight variations in the definition of that, but we still see, we're seeing, just for an example, our peak of the week is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for example, right? But on a given week, Tuesday could be the highest ridership day out of the week. And then the next week, Wednesday is the highest ridership day of the week. Another week, Thursday. It's at VRE, our Friday ridership, if you go back to even the beginning of VRE, our Friday ridership has always been the lowest day of the weekday, right? And it still is. And pre-COVID, we saw we did see Monday really actually kind of strengthening up for us. Monday is not obviously as robust as Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but we see Monday coming back now, and adding to that mix of just variable ridership trends during the weekdays. So I hesitate to suggest that a norm is set in, but maybe that is the new norm, right? Is the variability and unpredictability with the ridership, and I think that has some direct correlation, not just with working trends, but frankly with congestion that we see currently out on the you said it, we all have our I-95 stories. I'll add that in this region, of course, there's I-66 stories as well. So yeah, anyway, that's what we see.
I'll tell you, Rich, I grew up in Prince William County, and I learned how to drive on the interstate on I-66. And 15-and-a-half-year-old me thought 66 was also, quote unquote, the speed limit. And I quickly learned 66 is not the speed limit on 66.
Oh.
So if you're going that slow, you're going to be in trouble.
Exactly.
A question we got in the chat box, and something that I've kind of observed as well is, and I'll just read it directly. This person says, I see longer and longer trains as I travel, freight trains, I think. The Congressional Budget Office said they're now around, the average is 3 miles. What is the impact of those type of long freight trains on passenger rail? And I'll start with DJ, and we can go around.
They definitely impact what we're trying to do. I think the important thing there is the communication with the freight railroads. I mean, and one of the things we're doing is we add sidings and add more capacity. We're making sure that the sidings are long enough to handle these longer trains. I mean, freights have been doing this for the last few years. Precision-based or precision scheduled railroading leads to longer trains. And as long as we know where they are and they're in their slot and we, the passenger trains, are in our slot, they really shouldn't be that much of an impact. It's when we get a train that's late or they're late, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when this infrastructure is required to make sure that they are out of the way.
Thank you. Jen, we hear a lot about projects in Northern Virginia in the I-95 corridor. But can you talk a little bit about what's happening in the South and Southwest of Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about Northern Virginia because without Long Bridge, there's really no reason to talk about the rest of the state. So that focus is justifiable right now. But while VPRA is working on delivering Long Bridge, we're working on the future here at DRPT. So we have recently applied for, we're waiting to hear from the Federal Railroad Administration on the Corridor ID program for Washington, D.C. to and through Bristol. So that would get rail through Southwest Virginia into Tennessee. We also applied for the Commonwealth Corridor, which is an east-west corridor from Hampton Roads through Richmond, Charlottesville, and to points west. So that would get us some rail service for both of those corridors as we work to develop them for future passenger rail service. It's with the eye that we need to look beyond just Northern Virginia and making those connections further south. I don't want to step on VPRA too much, but they're working on the S line and have applied for corridor ID along with our partners at North Carolina DOT for the Washington, D.C. to Charlotte corridor. So I would say that while rightfully so, we have a lot of focus on Northern Virginia. I'd say from the planning and the development of the pipeline for the future, it certainly is in South and Southwest, non-Northern Virginia parts of the state.
Thanks, Jen. And a question kind of building off of that from one of our friends a little bit southwest of us asked, the state of Tennessee is working with the Fed to explore establishing routes, and one of them that they're looking at is Chattanooga to Bristol. Is it possible that should that route be selected, that it would impact Virginia's, I guess, desire or ability or to kind of speed up the connection to Bristol, if that were the Chattanooga to Bristol part were advanced?
So not to get too much in the details of Tennessee, but Tennessee had a legislatively mandated study that was complete back in the summer. And we did a forum in Bristol with Tennessee DOT and DRPT and the Federal Railroad Administration to talk about the future of of rail to and through Bristol. And at that point, believe that Chattanooga to Bristol is like a second tier route for them. They're looking more east-west, but certainly we have had for many years and continue to have a great dialogue with Tennessee DOT, and any work that we have, underway in that area or to make that connection certainly involves Tennessee and makes that connection through Southwest Virginia that much more fruitful to provide that connection into Tennessee, whether it's to Knoxville, to Chattanooga, Nashville, or wherever their plans take them in Tennessee.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. DJ, one of the number one questions we've gotten from the audience, can you give an update on the Roanoke to Christiansburg extension?
Sure. We, as I think folks know, purchased the V line, which is 28.5 mile right of way from just west of Roanoke down to the Christiansburg area. And we are currently in the process of finishing 30% design on getting that train service to the Christiansburg area. We received recently the first draft of the 30% design, and we pushed back with a number of questions. Okay, why this? What's going on here? Focusing on how to make sure we get there in the most timely, most efficient, and safest manner. We are committed to getting to the New River Valley as soon as possible. We're waiting to hear back from the 30% design folks to get answers to a lot of our questions, so we can then go to our board, the VPRA board, with a recommendation for the schedule forward. So we are very close to having that schedule. We made the decision, not just on this project, on all projects, that we were no longer going to commit to budgets or really ask for approval from our board until we got to 30% design, because we found a lot of the projects that were at 0% design. Thankfully, some were way off this way, some were way off this way. So they for the most part balanced out. But going forward, we're getting projects to 30% design and then bringing them to our board for, okay, here's the schedule that we want you to approve and that we will hold ourselves to. And you didn't ask this question, but similar to the S line going down to North Carolina, we're in the same place. We are about to go out for designers to get those segments, and we've split it up into 6 segments, get those to 30% design so they can give us an accurate assessment of how long it'll take and what it'll cost. And so that's how we're moving forward on those not yet shovel in the ground projects. That said, New River Valley, there are a lot of shovels in the ground already, because a lot of that work is being done by Norfolk Southern. They're making Roanoke Yard improvements. They're double tracking between Knoxville and Calverton. So there's work that's going on already. Obviously, we're much closer there than we are on the S.
Excellent. Thank you, DJ. And I know a lot of folks are very interested in that extension and the opportunities it brings to the entire Commonwealth. And you kind of touched on the 30% design. And so my apologies for the ad hoc question. But, one of the things that we hear a lot in transportation is the impact of inflation. And I know that's one of the big relevant things for the push to get projects to 30% design, is it gives you a better handle on what the realities of inflation and costs actually are. And so I guess if you don't mind, doing a little just round robin about what you've seen and how inflation has impacted some of our transportation projects. And since DJ, you were talking, I'll start with you, and maybe we can do a little round robin and things for the public to consider and to keep in the back of their mind.
Sure. So we have seen inflation. There's no doubt about it. Thankfully, the inflation that we saw 2 years ago has come way down. I mean, there were months where we looked at the cost of goods going up and we were like, well, wait a second, this is going to be a big problem. Thankfully, that has slowed down significantly and it's much more reasonable now. That said, we have no idea what the economy is going to do over the next 1, 3, 5 years. So we are working very hard to get these projects under contract so that inflation risk can be on the vendor and not on us. That's one of the things we talk about when we delay decisions. It doesn't just delay when the train is going to be there or when the infrastructure is going to be there. It adds cost, just the time value of money. So it's something we watch all the time. We're comfortable right now that our budget estimates have significant, probably isn't the right word, but sufficient contingency to cover inflation. But as we saw in 2021, 2022, it can bounce up. Again, that's why there's such a sense of urgency for us to get these projects under contract and moving forward.
Thank you, Jen?
So I'm going to agree with DJ and say that things have leveled off a little bit on the infrastructure side. I'm going to pivot for a minute and talk about transit, and particularly with vehicles. And this kind of impacts things like Amtrak Thruway and other types of services that do tie into our rail program as well. We saw incredible increases in vehicle costs during the pandemic, and those are not going back down. The suppliers of certain goods are really contracting, and that industry is really contracting. Those are things that concern me, because it does kind of have a ripple effect through our program, whether it's transit or rail.
Thank you. And Rich?
For the sake of not repeating anything, yeah, similar. 21, 22 was a tough year, or tough couple of years from an escalation or standpoint or inflation standpoint. We too have seen some, particularly on on our construction projects, some of that start to level off. We are updating our capital improvement program. Those still see some modest or moderate increases, and they're still considerably higher than what we saw in 21, but they have tamed themselves, if you will. Interesting that Jen brought up the vehicle side, because that's on that side of our business, rail equipment maintenance, rail equipment purchases, that type of stuff. We have not seen any relief, if you will. And not just from a inflationary standpoint, but just we still see some supply chain issues out there. And we've just had to readjust. We were talking on a different context about a new normal earlier, but we've just simply had to adjust to a new normal when it comes to lead times and stuff like that. And having to carry more inventory in your warehouse, all those types of things. I mean, those are, that's working capital, that's costs that you have to accumulate. So yeah, so it's still hitting us from all angles, if you will. But luckily on the construction side or the civil side, it seems to be subsiding, or we're just getting used to the big numbers. I don't know, either way, right?
Rich, here's a question from the attendees, and you touched on it a lot in your different answers. What are the plans for VRE to kind of be a full service, bi-directional, off-peak? They're a strong proponent of you, and would love to see VRE as a true option for travel across Nova and I guess the whole DC region.
I don't have the exact month, date, or year, but I will say, I mean, we see the same thing, but it really hinges on going back to that, to the pivotal project, the Long Bridge. I mean, the Long Bridge opens up all that capacity, and in conjunction with that, having the ability to, at least under normal operating modes, have freight and passenger rail separated. So you're looking in that 2030-ish, in that time frame, to be again, to be in a position where I think you can, fully utilize VRE's capabilities in the region. And that includes all the things that you just listed and the things that I previously listed as well. But again, we'll take incremental approaches to that. We'll get wins along the way. We'll do the best we can, if you will, given the constrained infrastructure that we have, and just do it the safest and the best way we know how to eventually get to that point.
Thank you, Rich. DJ, this question is for you, and I will phrase it as, whenever I talk about what Virginia is doing for not only transforming rail, but our approach to rail in general, it's always kind of quoting it as, it's like a Corvette on I-95. You have the ability to go real fast. You don't have the opportunity. And so the construction of assets and capacity. And so once the corridor is complete, will we finally have higher speed rail between Washington and DC? And what will the top speed, the reliability be, or the travel time along the corridor?
Yeah, so you phrased that very well. Thank you. Higher speed rail, we will have rail that will get you from Washington, D.C. to wherever you want to go in Virginia at in a time frame shorter than what you can get there in the car. And that's what's important. We need to be trip time competitive. The reliability is really key. And what this infrastructure is going to do, it's going to give us that improved reliability. So when we tell you, hey, if you get on the train in Richmond at 5:30, you're going to be in DC by 5 after 8, you're going to be there by 5 after 8. Nothing encourages folks to never take the train again more than, hey, I've got a 9 o'clock meeting. The schedule says I'll be there at 5 after 8. This is the one I'm taking, and having them pull in at 5 after 9. I mean, that just is unacceptable. And that's really what this new infrastructure is going to do. I want to be very careful about high-speed rail, because people think high-speed rail, they think the Acela on the Northeast Corridor, which is 150 plus. They think, oh, I was over in Europe and it was 200. That's not what we're doing here now. What we're doing here now is making sure that we have the infrastructure and the trains in place to get folks from where they want to go to where they want to go in a time that is better than it would take them in the car. Number one, it's better for the environment. Number two, it's better for their quality of life. And number three, it's faster. So that's really what we're working on. When we get to 2030 and Long Bridge is done, will we have all that we want? No, but we'll have more than we have now, and it'll be better than what we have now. And that's really our continuing goal.
Thank you. And I will kind of, as we're starting to wrap up, ask for final thoughts, or how we can help and support the Commonwealth and VRE in these initiatives and efforts. And so I will start with Jennifer, Rich, and then DJ.
Yeah, I think helping us continue to tell the good story of rail around the Commonwealth is the best thing that you can do. Everybody expects me to get up and tell a good story about rail. That's kind of what I do for a living. But I think the more that groups like Virginians for High-Speed Rail can go out and advocate and talk about, connecting communities and economic development and growth that ties back to our investments in rail infrastructure, I think is super important and greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I agree. And Danny, I'll take this opportunity. I appreciate the fact that I think we're about maybe 3 years running, maybe that you've gotten this group together in the fall and stuff like that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak in this forum, but also your group's support of rail, whether it's high-speed rail, whether it's passenger rail, whatever adjective you want to use, whether it's commuter rail, but just overall support for rail. And just I think by having the folks within your group and stuff, you get out there, sort of that old, we use it as a safety and security montage, as far as see something, say something. Get out there when you're experiencing Amtrak or even VRE service or whatever, say something, let the onboard crews know that you're there, and let them, give them some feedback. And of course, in these public forums, public comments, stuff like that, give us feedback. We all take it as constructive criticism. We all take it as means to for continuous improvement, and I know VRE is definitely a continuous improvement organization. So I'll just take the opportunity to throw that in there. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I don't want to repeat what Jen or Rich said. We're in the same place, though. I mean, we know, knock on wood, everything's going well, and we're continuing to make great progress, but we're only as good as our last report card, and we can't fix problems we don't know about. So when folks have a bad train ride, when folks don't have service where they want to have service, these are things we need to know about. I mean, hold us accountable. Danny, I think the work that you all are doing, letting us get the message out there, making sure there are no surprises, that everybody's expectations are level set. I think it's critical as we move forward. And at the end of the day, and I said this earlier about VPRA's relationship with DRPT, we all want as many transportation options as possible here in Virginia. And if we all work together, that's the only way that we're going to get a good network, a multimodal network. So thank you for your support. And as Rich said, I encourage folks, give us the feedback, because we can't fix, or we can't address what we don't know about. And I guess to that note, and I'm going to put Jen and Rich on the spot now. Danny, there are a lot of questions in the chat that weren't answered. I would love to get a copy of those and just be able to answer them, because I think that's the right thing to do. So if you could save those and send them, I think that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll certainly make that happen. And thank you again, everybody, DJ, Director DeBruhl, and Rich, for participating in this year's event. We greatly appreciate it, and all the great things happening in Virginia. We want to continue to pound the drum. And so very briefly, as we end, I just want to highlight VHSR in partnership with the Southern Environmental Law Center, the New River Valley Passenger Rail, Greater Washington Partnership, and RVA 757 Connects. Just released our latest passenger report, highlighting all the great things that are happening and what's kind of coming down the track, to use a train pun. Please check it out at vhsr.com/VPRR. And we look forward to seeing you all again, and this video will be online soon. And thank you again to our fantastic speakers and everybody for joining us today. Have a great day and happy holidays. Thank you.